Alright, what's up, YouTube friends? So, I'm back again to talk about something that is pretty obvious. But this is one of those fear porn topics. So, whatever. Um, this is MK Ultra, right? This CIA experiments starting back in the 60s. It has to do originally. This was related to Woodstock, the government creating LSD and different types of hallucinogens, and then having agents, you could say, distribute those hallucinogens to the people that were at Woodstock. So that that happened. Um, One thing I tried to share with people is if you go to CIA.gov and you go to the very bottom, I can't share the link, and if you try, I'd assume that you wouldn't be able to either. But if you go to the bottom, you'll see Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, in parentheses, and then you click on that, and then you'll see there's a search bar. You can browse, but this is all the documents that have been asked for via Freedom of Information Act requests. So you can type in dumb shit like zombies and aliens, and it'll give you the documents that were released due to the Freedom of Information Act. It's a really handy tool to have. Um, but moving on to the subject here. Um, so MK Ultra, the biggest part that everybody knows about, other than putting people into what are essentially prisons and torturing them into strange and submissive psychological states, a big part of it is the trauma-based mind control. The reason that I even want to talk about this, because I find myself lately in a position where my main goal is to help people understand that the people out here, not just in America, it's most obvious in those who are politically affiliated, specifically with those on the left side of the political spectrum. Like, when you look at those people, it's obvious. But it's also true about the opposite side. If you decide that you want to invest emotionally, physically, financially, psychologically into politics, all you're doing is dividing yourself and investing against your own favor. Political system has been around for thousands of years. The commercial code that governs the entire political system was made in Babylon by King Hammurabi. It's the commercial code, the thing that the government uses and adapts and changes and adds things to, but never takes things away from. Did you know in Kentucky, where I'm at, Cincinnati's right there, um, it's illegal to walk down the street with an ice cream cone in your pocket? Now, hundreds of years ago, when that was written, it made sense, because people would put sugar cones in their pockets and then walk right past the horse's face, and the horse would follow them off, right? So you're stealing somebody's horse. But now, uh, I don't think that a car is going to follow you down the street yet. Um, so they always add things to this commercial code and tell you that you cannot do this thing, but they never take away. They never take away from that fucking code. So, which, I mean, that leads to certain inevitabilities. Like, if you just keep adding things and adding things that you can't do, eventually what happens? But so everybody knows about the trauma-based mind control, and it's visible to see that people are psychologically manipulated today. And my goal lately has been to tell people that this is not their fault, in a sense, right? We're all responsible for ourselves. And this was my issue with this medical thing that just happened. If I'm responsible for me and you're responsible for you, then don't worry about what the fuck I'm doing. You're responsible for you, not me. So there is that. But there were factors and entities greater than the individual that are at play here. When the government does these projects, like if you read Amnesty International's report on torture, you'll see that everything that happened during this pandemic was straight out of that book. If you read it, you'll see every single thing that happened. The conspiracy theorists, those fucking wackos, seem to get everything right for some reason. I wonder why that is. That was sarcasm. I know that they're not wackos. So, let's get into this. Trauma-based mind control is a process where you just continuously pump out information that would destabilize someone emotionally or psychologically. And you do that in a manner where you can predict or even dictate what their response is going to be. Okay? A real easy example would be that if I pumped out a bunch of information saying that there is a zombie deer virus and it's causing deers to go and eat humans, I know that you're not going to go running up to a fucking deer in the woods, right? That's a really simple example, but there's also really complex and honestly, like, crazy sophisticated ways of predicting human behavior. And it's universal in application because all humans share in the same two natures, right? The thing is, those that operate in the higher nature, the male nature, aren't as susceptible to this bullshit that they do. So, could you think of somewhere that pumps out information constantly? We'll say 3 times a day, 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock. Actually, it's a lot more than 3. I don't watch TV, haven't in a long time. Let's see, we got the 9 o'clock news, the 12 o'clock news, the 3 o'clock news, the 5 o'clock news, and whatever else that it is. And before you just take my word for it, or before you say, oh, this guy's fucking crazy, he's saying that the news is trauma-based mind control. We need to acknowledge a few things here. So in the Senate hearing, way back in the 80s, when the director of the CIA was asked, do you have any assets? Does the CIA have any assets in the media? The answer was not no. The answer wasn't yes either. But the answer was, that's something we'd like to answer in private. There were implications that can be made there, right? Assumptions. And they're not faulty assumptions at all. If you were to go into court, and that's the way that I try to think about everything, as if it was in court. If you were in court and the judge asked you if you, we'll just use gun crime as an example. If you shot this person and you said, actually, I'd like to talk about that in private. It's safe to assume that you did in fact do it, but there's some circumstance involved where you feel that that was justified. And again, example. So the CIA director gave his answer that he didn't. Essentially what he said is he did not want the answer to that question to be public knowledge. So we can make that assumption. I think that's more than fair, especially considering the next things. The news is like the most watched thing on TV, unless you're CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, because we know those are all bullshit now. I'm talking about local news stations. You know, the ones where they had the video of all the different news stations saying false information is a threat to our democracy, and it zooms out and it zooms out, and all these news stations said the exact same thing. That shit's all fake. Everything on the news is fake. And I'll give you an example of that in a minute. But majority of the people around the world depend on their local news station in order to figure out what's going on. So why then does state, county, state, and federally funded media organizations not actually present any sort of news, nothing of substance, nothing of value whatsoever? All they present is fear porn constantly. Shootings, stabbings, gun crime, vehicular crimes. All they do is present fear porn all day long, constantly. I welcome you. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I welcome you to show me a news organization that has presented 2 positive stories in a row. Here's what they do. They'll give you 6 or 7 scary stories. Zombie deer virus, cyber attack, COVID deaths, woo! And then they'll sprinkle in some little bullshit to ease the tension, and then they throw the weight right back on you. That's how trauma-based mind control works. You continuously provide the information, right, and then you provide a break, a little second to catch your breath, and then once they call it a breath, you need to wait on again, hit them again. That's how it works. That's if you go look into the CIA documents where they talk about trauma-based mind control, you'll see. CNN isn't an exception. Nobody watches that shit. But they're not an exception. They do the same exact thing. They just tell you about bigger stories that they think should be highlighted on a national stage rather than just a statewide or citywide stage. How come no news organizations show us a list of the people that got full scientific scholarships, hell, even athletic scholarships, full scientific scholarships to major universities? We don't know who those people are. We don't know who the most recent graduated rocket scientist or geophysicist. We don't know those people, but we know George Floyd, a man who, I'll be easy here, disrespectfully and grossly was equated to Martin Luther King. Oh, that really grinded my gears. It really did. All the people to compare to Martin Luther King Jr., George Floyd wasn't him. Was not the fucking one. That's crazy that they even did that. But why did it work? Because this fear porn has been so habituated in the minds of the people that they depend on it now. If there isn't some scary thing that's coming to get them, they can't survive. They just can't survive without it. And I was like this too. I was atheist. I was all about the science. My grandma was Catholic. I used to say dumb shit to her. Well, you know, just typical atheist shit, lacking understanding. Like, can God create a rock so heavy that he can't lift it himself? If yes, then he isn't all-powerful and whatnot. And if no, then he isn't all-powerful and whatnot. That's nonsensical. That doesn't prove shit. That's just some stupid physical thing that someone came up with because they thought they were clever. It's not clever. It shows a complete lack of understanding spiritual principles and concepts. These are 2 different worlds we're talking about. But anyway, the media, funded by the government, money, they take your money and they give it to these media companies to pump out fear porn. That's it. This fear porn and this emotional trauma that Every time you watch the news, you're going to suffer emotional trauma if you think it's real every single time. And when that happens, they can dictate your behavior, they can predict the behaviors, they can do those things. They've been studying this shit since the 70s, the 60s, at least 69. So there's no question about it. If you just think, remove all that overly complicated, sophisticated bullshit. Think about it simply. If there is a way to manipulate people's minds by constantly pumping out fear, right? And it just so happens that there's something wrong with people. And we know that there's a source of constant fear that's being pumped out. It's just a logical deduction. It really is. It's logical deduction. Just from looking at the obvious. But oftentimes people try to overcomplicate these things and split hairs and say, oh no, this was this, but this was that. No, that's not necessary. It's really that simple. If you pump constant fear out, it's going to affect people's minds. That's what happened with Donald Trump. That's what's happening with Joe Biden right now. As much as I don't like Joe Biden or Donald Trump, the thing is, there's a very high chance that they mentally and emotionally, they function at levels that most people can't even comprehend. Joe Biden is in his 70s, I think, maybe his 80s, and he probably is sharper than most of the people that I know. If he wasn't, he wouldn't be in the position that he's in. It's that simple. Like, that's a logical deduction. He isn't an old dumbass who's being manipulated by other people. That isn't the case. He's probably, and this is more likely, he's sharp enough to know that if he says things like, oh, they told me not to ask questions, but and oh, they said I gotta go, he knows that when shit goes bad, you're not gonna blame him. You're gonna blame they. And they said I gotta go. Whoever that they is in your mind, in actuality, they don't exist. But in your mind, it's that they that is to blame. Whether you think that's the elites, self-proclaimed, or some group of people that live in the desert nation founded in 1947 by the U.S. who call themselves, but aren't, but are of the synagogue of Satan, worshiping the physical and all the pleasurable things. Either way, that's wit. That's knowing how to manipulate people's perceptions. Most people can't do that. Most people, I try to love people. Like I said, I try to show people that it's not, people aren't making these decisions. Average people, they're manipulated by bigger forces, higher forces that are here on the physical plane. But those bigger forces, those higher forces here on the physical plane are manipulated by bigger forces and higher forces on the spiritual plane. That's what it is. Alright. So before I go, I want to give you an example of both how the news will present you with several emotionally, psychologically traumatizing stories, and then they'll grant you a moment of reprieve, and then they'll, boom, get you again, and then commercial break. And then when they come back from commercial, it's 17 dead and da-da-da, you know. So this is kind of popular, I guess. So a lot of people probably know what it is. There was a news anchor, I wonder why they're called anchors, who was covering a story about a pig, and this pig's name was Chris P. Bacon. Okay? Ha ha. And this news anchor just laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed forever. That was your reprieve. That was your moment of setting all the stress and worry aside and you get your laugh, and then once that's over, somebody cuts in with two people left dead after a gunfight, and da da da. That's how it goes. But they always give you that funny story in the middle, because that's how you make the psychological torture really take hold. Read Amnesty International report on torture. It's plain as day. If you can read that book and then look at what's happened since 2016 and say that those aren't the same thing, I would absolutely love to have a discussion with you. Absolutely love it, because I like exploring psychology, and denial is part of that. All right. I guess I'm gonna go. Did I have anything else to say? I guess not. If I do, I'll be back. Love you guys. I'll see you soon.